Hi everyone, Mr. Edgett here. I want to introduce myself and show you this lesson that I've created for you. This is actually a live math lesson that I used in the classroom this past year. I was a fourth grade teacher at Boyertown Elementary. I was in charge of math, science, and social studies for two different classes. We were compartmentalized, so what would happen is I would switch kids in the afternoon with another fourth grade teacher, and primary focus was math, and then science and social studies I taught as well. So this is actually a live lesson that I did use. I would always start the day with the objective, the I can statement for the day. I can portray an understanding of fractions through the use of tape diagrams. So to give you a little bit of background knowledge, students would have utilized tape diagrams a lot by this point. I believe this was Module 6, much later on in the year. Students would have learned about fractions. They would learn about decimals. So we're taking prior knowledge and we're actually decomposing these fractions. We're going to show equivalent fractions and we're going to show their equivalent decimal form. So today I will be able to use meters to model the decomposition of one whole into hundreds and represent and count hundreds. So this is a warm-up problem, a little bit of practice, instead of jumping straight into it. In my classroom, we used whiteboards. I would be at the front of the board. This is a Google slide that I created. I'd be projecting this. So in a virtual environment, they would have their own personal whiteboards. Whatever I draw, you draw. So what I would be drawing right now is I'd be drawing this meter stick. We have 3 shaded here out of 10 total. Again, students would have already used tape diagrams a lot at this point, and this is something that we would have previously done. So I want you to shade 3 out of your 10 in total. At the top of your board, I want everybody to star, again, this is past knowledge that we've learned, how many centimeters are equal to 1 meter. We have 100 centimeters in 1 meter, so I want you to star that on your whiteboard. Don't ever erase that. We're going to leave that there. So that way we remember what we're working with today. So for the first question, it says, what is the length of the shaded part of the meter stick in centimeters? So we have a meter. We want to know how many centimeters do we have? Well, we have 3 boxes shaded. And we know that this is 3/10 because we've learned about that. Well, today we're taking it a step further because they want to know centimeters. So I want you to take a different color. I would have probably used blue. And I want you to split each box into 10. So just draw 9 lines. If you end up doing 9, it comes out to 10 boxes. 9 lines going straight down. You got 10 strips here, and I would be doing this on my whiteboard. They'd be doing it on there. So in a virtual environment, I would have a marker, and I would be doing slashes through these boxes. They don't have to be perfect, and we're going to do that all the way across. So at the end of doing that, I would go back and show them if we have 10 here, because we split it into 10s, we have 10, 20, 30. So we recognize this as 3/10. If we take it a step further, we have 30 hundredths. Because again, we're working with centimeters. If this is one big meter and we split it into 10s, we have to split it into 10 again, each box. And again, I would have shown that. So we have 30 hundredths. B, what fraction of a meter is just 3 centimeters? So we're just counting 3 of the little strips in one box. Again, I would have this drawn, and I'd be using a different color, maybe say green. We would have 3 100ths. So on the next slide, I have the answer for that. We have 30 out of 100, or we have 30 centimeters shaded. What fraction of a meter is just 3 centimeters? And I would have gone back and we would have seen, if each box is split into 10, only 3 of those out of all of these, because again, our star, 100 centimeters equals 1 meter. We just have 3 100ths. So again, this is kind of a little bit of a warm-up. This is what the students, when we would have drawn all those slashes, this is what it would have looked like. and my different color here, say this is all in, let's say, red, the slashes are in blue, we would have kept going with the blue. So I always took, sometimes what I put on there, and I would be drawing a tape diagram, with this projected, and I would keep going with the slashes all the way down. But what's shaded in black is just 30 of those slashes. So 30 out of your 100, and that's how I'd be portraying this. So then in decimal form, express the length of the shaded portion. Well, we already have learned about decimals at this point, so I would be showing them what it looks like. We said 30 hundredths. So if we have 30 hundredths, and I told the students, when we were learning about fractions and we were learning about decimals, if you have an extra 0 on the top, you have an extra 0 on the bottom, you can knock those guys out. So I would take a yellow marker, cross out your 0 on the top, cross out your 0 on the bottom. We have 3/10. And then since we had already learned about the tens place and the hundredths place, we go back and we represent this as 0.3. Why is the 3 in this spot? Because we have 3/10. So we have a 3 in the tens place. Or we could say, some kids, I always had this up here because they understood it in a different way. Not all students are going to understand things in the same way. If we have 30 hundredths, you can tack on that 0. Because really then you're underlying the whole thing and saying you have 30 hundredths. You have a 3 in the tens place, is 0 in the hundredths, but if you underline the entirety of this, you have 30 hundredths. So 30 hundredths or 3/10. And again, that's what we're doing here. We have 3/10. We split it, each box into 10. So here we have it shown as 3/10. Here we have it shown as 30 hundredths. And again, I would have this on my board. I would have this organized in a virtual setting. I would be showing this. This is just the information that I created the day. I always like to draw it myself and then do an extension of what we're doing. So they could always come back and look at this, but they could also look at what we're doing on the board, as an extension of it. We're taking it a step further. I want to express the information here, but then I'm actually drawing it out and I'm taking it that next step. So I would have students erase that. That's kind of more background knowledge. The problem here today, I want them to erase. We're going to draw our tape diagram. We always split it into 10. I want you to shade one box, and then I want you to break the next box into 10 and only shade 3. So underneath that, we're going to write the fraction of what we have. We have 1/10. We have 3 hundredths. Now we're going to add these two together. We have 1/10. We have 3 hundredths. We have 13 hundredths. How do we show this as a decimal? We have 0.13. Why is it 0.13? Well, we know that at the first place after the decimal, if we've learned about this, is the tens place. So if there's a 1 in the tens place, perfect, 1/10, because that's a fraction we have. Then we go over to the next place value, and we've learned about this. Again, this is prior knowledge. The 3 is in the hundredths place, which is perfect because we have 3 hundredths represented. So we know that it's 0.13 because we can always take our finger, underline the 1. What's the 1 in? It's in the tens place. We only have 1/10. Beautiful. Take your other marker, underline the 3. The 3 is in the what place? The hundredths place. Okay, perfect. That's what we had over here. We had 3 hundredths. Great. So next I want you to erase this. And next the students would be working on this one together. So I want you to draw your tape diagram, always split into 10, shade 3 boxes. The fourth box I want you to split into 10. And somebody tell me, how many do we have shaded here? Somebody would tell me we have 8 shaded here. Now I'd be asking 8 what? 8 oranges, 8 monkeys, 8, and hopefully somebody would recognize 8 100ths. Okay, why is it 8 100ths? And I always had the why. So when the students were answering my questions, they would need to know the why. Who can tell me why is it 8 100ths? Well, remember back in our star, we said 100 centimeters equals 1 meter. So when we're working down here and we have it split into tenths, we know it's out of 100 because each box is split into 10. So we got our how many here? We got our 3 tenths. Okay, perfect. How many in this next one? And somebody would be telling me 8 100ths. Okay, great. They explained that. They would be writing it directly underneath here. 3 tenths, 8 100ths. Who can tell me what the total would become now? 38 hundredths. And again, I would ask them why. Why is it 38 hundredths? Well, what we had learned previously is whenever we had tenths, we could always tack on a 0 here. So if we tack a 0 on the top, we got to do it on the bottom. We have 30 hundredths and we have 8 hundredths. And that really helps students. So what I would be doing on my board right now is I'd be using, say, green since that's red. I'd have tacked on my 0, 30 hundredths. I'd draw an arrow down here, 8 hundredths. Now we can add straight across. We have our 38 hundredths. So what does this become as a decimal? And hopefully somebody would recognize this becomes 0.38. Okay, why? Well, if we look at the 3, it's in the tens place. We have 3 tenths. If we look at the next place value, we have an 8. It's in the hundredths place. Okay, perfect. We have 8 100ths. What I would have them do next is I want you to erase, and I want you to draw exactly what I have up here. And I want you to model how many tenths are there, how many hundredths are there. I want you to write the fractions below, and I want you to turn that into a decimal. So they would be doing this one on their whiteboard independently. So that was the I do, we do, you do. In the virtual setting, the students would be doing that on their whiteboard. And then we would go over this together. So, and I forgot to say, as I would go through these problems, I always had the students, give me a thumbs up if this makes sense, thumbs downs if you're lost, thumbs to the side if it kind of makes sense. As my formative assessment in a virtual setting, from my understanding, you can kind of do that same thing where only I can see what the students are saying. Give me a thumbs up if this makes sense, thumbs down if you're lost, thumbs to the side if it kind of makes sense. After they had finished that problem and we had gone over this one together, I apologize, a little bit of it is taken away. I would go down to my exit ticket for the day. And I also use this as I would have little sheets of paper and I would have this problem on there and have somebody pass it out. I would collect that and then I would use that for my grouping for the next day when we would split into small groups. So in a virtual setting, maybe I could create, depending on the software you guys are using, some sort of exit ticket that they can show me that they understood the material for the day. We utilized a lot of Google Classroom at Boyertown. I know you could create a Google form. I could, again, do something like that, send it out to each student. I want you to create, I would put this exit ticket in the Google form. They would send me the Google form. Maybe I would use that for my small groups for the next day, or that would just give me a basic understanding of who really understood the material for the day. So I hope this lesson was informative, a little bit on, the kind of style that I had in the classroom. And if you have any questions or any further comments, please feel free to reach out to me. Hopefully I performed this the way that I should. And that's about it. Thank you for your time.